The dust, always the dust. 60 years of sanctity, and still this insidious powder of the past settles, slow, suffocating, and persistent, on every brittle page, every silent icon, every agonizing fold of my coarse gray veil. I sweep it away each morning, a frenzied, futile gesture against the relentless tide of time. They preach that the soul drinks deep of peace in repetition, that the ironclad rhythm of the life, the endless call of matins, lauds, prime, the scrubbing, the sweeping, the wiping, is the flawless, steady heartbeat of utter devotion. And for 6 decades, I have forced myself to live that devotion, beat by rigid, crushing beat. But peace, true peace, is a treacherous phantom, a wisp of vapor, elusive as the final, vanishing curl of steam rising from this pale porcelain cup. Look at these roses. 3. An insult disguised as piety, a thoughtless gift from the young Mother Superior. She fears red in the public eye, deems it too worldly for the stark refectory, too scandalously bold for the chaste chapel, so she banishes them here to my solitary alcove. She believes they whisper of the Sacred Heart, bleeding for mankind. And perhaps they do. But to me, they are a torment, a brazen monument to his memory. The searing, unforgettable color of the silk scarf he wore on that bitter, soul-crushing December day. The violent, beautiful flush on his cheeks when he dared to laugh. A sound I haven't heard in 60 years. 3 roses. 3 cataclysmic, soul-shattering moments that utterly annihilated Alara's world. And from the wreckage, brutally forged the shell they call Sister Agnes. The first was the blossoming of the curse when I was 17. I was Alara then, just Alara, reckless, vibrant, and possessed by the glorious, terrifying delusion that the entire breathing world was mine for the seizing. I collided with him at the county fair. Elias. He wasn't like the others. No loud roar or vulgar boast. He stood silent by the shooting gallery, his gaze intense, sketching the raw, vulnerable faces of the crowds in a small, worn leather notebook. He was a stone carver, a titan of granite and marble, his hands scarred and powerful, yet capable of holding that pencil with an impossible, agonizing delicacy. He captured me, not a flattering idol, but a cruel, perfect truth. My desperately earnest eyes, my mouth forever suspended between a smile and a profound, aching question. He titled the sketch, The Question. He spoke, his voice the rough music of chisel on stone. You look like you're forever suspended, waiting for an answer to a question your soul hasn't dared to articulate. The question, I now understand, was the primal scream of existence. What is the ultimate, non-negotiable desire of your soul, Alara? For months that felt like a lifetime, the answer was an unqualified, breathless Elias. We met in secret, under the monstrous, sheltering arms of the great sycamore by the churning river. We did not waste time on the vapid currency of piety or the sterile concepts of eternity. We spoke of tactile reality, the burning grit of sandstone, the terrifying smoothness of polished marble, the impossible weight of the silver locket he was crafting for me. We spoke of escape, of fleeing to the ancient, promised lands of Italy and Greece, of standing tiny before colossal ruins, and feeling the very breath of civilization on our necks. He saw the fire in me, the inferno that demanded to build something monumental, something defiant against mortality. He promised me a life built not merely of stone, but of laughter carved into time itself. That was the first rose, the blinding, intoxicating promise. The thorn that pierced the heart, even as it bloomed. The second rose, the rose of sacrifice, bloomed violently in the cold chapel of my old parish. It was the feast of the Ascension, drenched in false glory. I was 18. My mother, may her soul find the peace I have not, had been relentlessly planting the bitter seed of vocation since I was small. The crushing solemnity of the high mass, the priest's booming voice, the thick, cloying scent of frankincense and suffocating beeswax. It pressed down on me, heavy and utterly inescapable. I had spent a year traversing two irreconcilable paths. The sun-drenched, pagan path with Elias, and the shadowed, hushed, sacred path of my inexorable calling. I remember sinking to my knees, paralyzed, trying to desperately claw back a prayer, trying to reconcile the fierce, demanding, utterly human love for a man with the calm, icy, all-encompassing love I was told was reserved for Christ. Elias had given me an ultimatum: run away with him to Dublin. Start a life where only we mattered, just us against the world. But on that disastrous day, as the choirs perfect, in human harmony sang the Ave Maria, the foundation of my reality fractured. It wasn't a celestial whisper from heaven. It was the crushing sight of the elderly sisters sitting motionless in the front pews, their faces etched with the deep, cold canyons of renunciation, their hands folded over lives spent entirely in selfless, grinding service. I saw not contentment, but a terrifying, absolute purpose. A sacrifice so completed became a final, chilling form of freedom. I screamed the question silently into the silence. If I seize Elias' hand, will I forever be haunted by the specter of my disappointing God? Will the relentless, accusing sound of the choir be the background hum of my marriage? And conversely, if I choose this veil, this tomb of silence, will the roaring, breathing world ever truly acknowledge my existence again? I committed the ultimate betrayal. I chose the eternal, chilling disappointment of the man I adored over the transient, earthly disappointment of the God I felt compelled to serve. Or so I deluded myself. I delivered the news to Elias like a high priestess, pronouncing a death sentence upon her own heart. He didn't plead. He didn't erupt in magnificent, necessary rage. He simply took my hands, these same hands, now brittle, spotted, and uselessly clasped around a relic, and looked at me with an awful, crystalline clarity. You are choosing a perfect God over an imperfect man, he said, his voice stripped bare, flat, and hollow as a newly carved tomb. But Alara, the imperfect man, loved you with a truth that was perfect. And now, you will have to carve a statue of cold, untouchable perfection out of 60 years of suffocating silence. And I tell you now, you will find the stone too cold to ever fully thaw your soul. He vanished. He left me 3 red roses outside the convent gate the next morning, impaled upon a single, agonizing note that read, "A love that never dies." That was the second rose, the cruel, defining incision. The wound that dictated every subsequent beat of my heart's agonizing, unlived life. The third rose, this fatting, final bloom, is the one I am condemned to live with now. It is this terrible, slow-motion surrender of old age. It is the inescapable, brutal realization that Elia's was devastatingly, tragically right. For 60 years, I have pursued that promised statue of perfection. I have relentlessly taught the sterile geometry of the universe to dull children. I have ceaselessly sponged the fever from the dying. I have cleaned the altars until they shone with a desperate, false purity. And I have prayed until my knees were permanently deformed and my throat was a raw husk. I have done good, monumental, necessary work. The sisters who glide around me now, the young postulants who flutter like confused, colorless moths, they venerate me as a granite pillar, a woman of deep, unshakable, terrifying faith. But I have never truly achieved the absolute, sacred silence that is the bedrock of sanctity. There is always a noise, a relentless, low, agonizing hum beneath the triumphant, empty Gregorian chants and the shuffling sound of my own haunted footsteps. It is the deafening sound of an unlived, brutally truncated life. I often stare, transfixed, at the stern, accusing portraits on the wall, the spectral faces of my predecessors. Did Sister Veronica, who succumbed to the plague, ever secretly ache for the weight of a child who called her mother? Did Sister Helena, the formidable, iron-willed Mother Superior, ever wonder what it felt like to be devoured by the kiss of a man whose rough hands smelled deliciously of turpentine and the dust of mortal marble? Or was their faith truly an impenetrable shield, forged thick enough to ward off the agonizing, human temptations of the world? The ultimate, savage irony of my life is that I entered this convent seeking peace, but the only true, agonizing peace that ever descended upon me was when I finally accepted the absolute, eternal lack of it. I recall a silent retreat years ago. The visiting priest, a weary, insightful man, spoke of the insurmountable chasm between the vocation, the overwhelming, divine summons, and the personal self, the fragile human heart. He warned that sometimes they merge, but often they stand as two opposing, mutually destructive poles. I saw my truth in that moment. My spirit was undeniably tethered to God. The vocation was valid, terrifyingly true. But my simple, earthly, bleeding heart, the vessel of Alara, remained utterly, unforgivably bound to Elia's. I never risked a message. I never dared a look. The world beyond the convent walls became a scorched, forbidden city in my mind, a place where a past self still walked, her voice ringing with laughter under a long-dead sycamore tree. A few years ago, the bishop himself, a weary shadow, visited. He was speaking on the monumental, agonizing nature of sacrifice, and he paused, hovering by my side. He declared, his voice full of solemn conviction, "Sister Agnes, you have lived a perfect life of relentless service. Your sacrifice is utterly complete." I summoned the practiced, brittle smile of the faithful. I took his frail hand, but in the hollow cavern of my head, Elia's voice roared, a thunderous echo. "You will have to carve a statue of perfection out of silence, and I fear you'll find the stone too cold." The stone was cold, cruelly, eternally cold. I have spent my life chipping away at the marble of my own terrified being, shaping myself into the flawless, empty image of a servant. But the core, the fragile, screaming, pulsating core of Alara, was left aching, raw, and utterly exposed. Now I sit here in the brutal, waning light, with the conflicting, maddening scent of old, crumbling paper and fresh, violent roses, and I stare into the inevitable conclusion of this desolate journey. The vows I took, poverty, chastity, obedience, were nothing but the skeletal structure. The true, terrifying, unsung fourth vow was memory, preserved in amber sorrow. I vowed to keep his memory, polished and sacred, in the deepest, most inaccessible recess of my soul, knowing that every act of wrenching charity, every whispered, desperate prayer, every long, agonizing night spent nursing the sick, was also an act of penance for the unforgivable sin of abandoning him. His magnificent, denied love became the relentless, burning ache that fueled every single moment of my service. So I sit, a ghost of a woman, Sister Agnes, and I contemplate the trinity of red roses, the one that was promise, the sun-drenched beginning, the one that was pain, the irreversible severing, and the one that is acceptance, the final, quiet surrender. The final rose is acceptance. It is not, by any means, happiness, but it is a desolate, profound peace. It is the quiet, terrifying understanding that the two paths, God's and Elias's, were never truly separate after all. The love I savagely denied one, I poured, purified by 60 years of searing sorrow, into the other. And perhaps, only perhaps, that final integrated structure is the most beautiful testament of all. A life built not entirely of cold, dead stone, but of the persistent, warming, unquenchable fire of a love that was tragically, defiantly immortal. I lift the cup, I sip the tea. It is utterly cool now, tasting of ash. The steam is gone, only the scent remains, and the silence, the wonderful, terrible, beautiful, shattering silence of 60 years. I am ready now.